Hi everyone, if you watched some of my previous videos, you probably already know a little bit about me. You may know me from my videos about my research internship in Japan, or maybe you've seen my latest video about my new life here in Canada. But I realized that I've never actually sat down and properly introduced myself. Who am I? How did I ended up doing research in Japan? How did I move from Ukraine to Canada? And probably the biggest question, how did I get into a master's program in Canada with full funding? Because trust me, it definitely didn't happen overnight. So today I want to tell you the whole story. I'll tell you a little bit about my background, how I prepared for studying abroad, how I searched for universities and supervisors, how many professors I contacted, and believe me, the number is a little crazy, what documents I needed, and finally we'll talk about probably the most interesting part, money. How my funding actually works, what it covers, and whether it's enough to live independently as a student in Canada. So let's start from the beginning. I'm originally from Ukraine and I completed my bachelor's degree at Chernivtsi National University, very beautiful university I might say. My field was hydrometeorology within earth sciences and I graduated with honors. But the idea of studying abroad actually started several years before I finished my degree, and weirdly enough, I think this whole journey started because of one random TikTok video. It was 2020, COVID had started, everything moved online, and like many other people, I was spending most of my time at home. University wasn't extremely difficult at that point. I suddenly had much more free time than usual, and honestly I was bored. One day I was scrolling through TikTok and saw a video saying something like, if you've been waiting for a sign to start learning English, this is your sign. And I remember thinking, why not? I didn't have some huge plan. I wasn't thinking I'm learning English because one day I'm going to move to Canada. Absolutely not. I just thought it would be useful and maybe even fun. So that same day I downloaded several apps for learning English vocabulary and started learning words. And somehow I kept doing it almost every single day. After a few months, vocabulary wasn't enough anymore, so I started learning grammar. Then I started watching videos in English, reading more, finding different websites and textbooks, and slowly building a foundation. And once my English became better, something else started happening. My words suddenly felt bigger. For the first time, I seriously started thinking, what if I could actually study abroad? That's when I discovered that international students usually need an English proficiency exam such as IELTS or TOEFL. I've researched both and eventually decided that TOEFL was a better option for me, so I started preparing, again, completely by myself, no tutors, just me, the internet, textbooks, practice tests, and probably way too many tabs open on my computer. In 2023, I took the TOEFL for the first time and I got 92 points. My scores were 18 in reading, 26 in listening, 25 in speaking, and 23 in writing. And honestly, I was disappointed because my goal was 100 plus. Reading especially didn't go the way I expected, and I remember leaving the test thinking that I could have done much better. But looking back now, I see the result completely differently. I had started learning English by myself only a couple of years earlier, and without tutors or expensive courses, I had reached approximately a B2 level and was able to take an international academic English exam. That's actually something I'm very proud of now, and I didn't give up on that 100 goal either, but we'll come back to that later. At the same time, I started learning much more about studying abroad. I watched webinars, I read university websites, watched other students' videos, and tried to understand what universities were actually looking for. And I realized something very important. Good grades alone probably weren't going to be enough. I needed experience. So during my third year of university, I started becoming much more active academically. I attended conferences, I worked on research projects, I started working in my actual field while I was still a student, and by the time I graduated, I even had 2 publications. Basically, I was slowly trying to build my CV, not because I had some perfect step-by-step plan. I definitely didn't. I was just trying to use every opportunity that could potentially help me in the future. And I should also mention that all of this was happening during a very difficult period in Ukraine. In 2023, we had frequent power cuts, air raid alerts, and periods of online learning again. Sometimes studying was genuinely difficult simply because there was no electricity, but life continued. We continued studying, I continued working, and I kept trying to move toward this goal. Then in 2024, I got my first international research experience. I was accepted as a volunteer for a research project with a Canadian company. It was online and lasted only 3 months, but for me it was a huge step. For the first time I was working internationally. We had meetings every week, everything was in English, and suddenly I couldn't just learn English from a textbook anymore. I actually had to use it. I had to speak, I had to understand people, I had to discuss research, and that experience helped me become much more confident. My final year of bachelor's was intense. I was studying, I was working, I was writing my bachelor's thesis, and at some point I realized that there was absolutely no way I could also prepare a strong master's application at the same time. So I made a decision that I think was really important for me. I decided to take a gap year. And I know that sometimes people are afraid of taking a gap year because it feels like you're losing time. But for me, it was the opposite. I knew exactly why I needed that year. I wanted to improve my English. I wanted to strengthen my CV. I wanted to get more experience. And most importantly, I wanted enough time to prepare good applications instead of rushing everything. There was also another reality. Applying abroad isn't free. English exams cost money, applications cost money, documents cost money, and eventually moving to another country costs money too. So after graduating for about 4 months, I worked 2 jobs. At the same time, I was working, studying English, researching universities, trying to understand international admissions, and also somehow trying to have a normal life while living in a country at war. It was definitely an interesting period. But then something happened that made me feel like all of that work was finally starting to pay off. I got accepted for a research internship at OIST, the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology in Japan. If you've been following my channel for a while, you probably already know this part of the story because I have a whole series of videos about my life in Japan. But this opportunity was honestly incredible. The internship was fully funded, my flight from Ukraine to Okinawa was covered, I received free accommodation on campus, university transportation was free, even the gym was free. And on top of that, I received a monthly payment for living expenses. I remember getting that acceptance and thinking, wait, is this actually real? After years of studying, working, improving my English, trying to build experience, someone was actually going to pay me to fly to Japan and do research. So I went to Okinawa for 3 months. It was absolutely worth it. I gained research experience, learned so much, worked in an international environment, improved my English even more, and of course made a ridiculous number of memories. After that, I continued preparing for the next step and remember the TOEFL score of 92. Well, I took the exam again. This time I got 24 in reading, 27 in listening, 26 in speaking, and 25 in writing, which finally gave me what I had wanted for so long, 100 plus on the TOEFL. And I think that moment was important to me not only because of the number, it was proof that I had actually improved. I studied with random vocabulary apps during COVID, and several years later I was using English for international research and had reached the score I once thought was incredibly difficult. By that point I also had more research experience, additional activities, and eventually I thought, okay, I think I've prepared enough. It's time to stop preparing and actually apply. And this is where the story gets interesting, because I knew from the beginning that Canada was my first choice, but I wasn't going to send one application and hope for the best. I researched universities in Canada and the United States. I looked at the graduate programs, I searched for professors whose research matched my interests, and eventually I contacted 66 professors across 14 universities. Yes, 66. And most of them didn't say yes, some rejected me, a lot never replied at all, some wanted to meet with me, and few gave me exactly the answer I had been hoping for, and that's what we're going to talk about next. My strategy was actually pretty simple. First, I searched for universities with programs related to my field. Then I opened the department website and started looking through faculty, professor after professor after professor. I checked what they were working on, what their research interests were, and whether their work had anything in common with my background or with the research I wanted to do in the future. And whenever I found someone who seemed like a good match, I added them to my list. I had 14 universities on my list, and across those universities I found 66 professors I could potentially contact. The universities I looked at included the University of Victoria, the University of Alberta, UBC, and several universities in the United States. And I don't think I need to read all 14 universities because we would be here until tomorrow, but I do want to show you the numbers because I think they're really important. And here's the important part, I did not get 66 positive replies, not even close. Let's talk about what I actually sent. I didn't just write, "Hi, I want to study at your university, do you have funding?" Every email was personalized. I would first read about the professor's research and then try to explain why I was contacting that specific person. My emails usually follow the very simple structure. First, I introduced myself, who I was, what I had studied, and what my academic background was. Then I briefly mentioned my research experience. After that, I explained why their work interested me and how it connected to my own background or future research interests. And finally, I asked whether they were accepting new graduate students and whether that might be an opportunity to work with them. I also attached my academic CV. And this is something I think is really important. Don't send exactly the same generic email to 50 professors. Of course, you can have a basic template. I definitely did. I'm not writing 66 completely different emails from zero, but the part about why you're contacting the professors should be specific. This part was fun. You send an email, you wait, you check your inbox, nothing, you wait some more, still nothing, then finally you get a notification, you open it immediately, and it says unfortunately. Welcome to graduate applications. But seriously, I think this is something people don't talk about enough. Most of the professors I contacted never replied to me, and several of those who did reply simply said no. Sometimes they didn't have funding, sometimes they weren't accepting new students, and sometimes I never found out why because I simply didn't get a response. At first, of course, that was discouraging. You spend time researching someone, writing an email, checking everything, and then nothing happens. But after a while, I stopped taking it personally because I realized I didn't need all 66 professors to say yes. I only needed one good opportunity, and eventually the positive replies started coming. Let's start with the university where I am now, the University of Victoria. I contacted 4 professors here, 1 didn't reply, 2 told me they couldn't take me as a student, and then there was 1 professor who was interested. When we were talking, he told me that if I joined his group, funding would be guaranteed. That was obviously a huge deal for me because I knew that I wasn't looking for a master's program where I would have to pay international tuition and support myself completely on my own. I needed funding, so UVic became a very serious option. At the same time, I was still contacting other universities, and I actually got several other positive responses. At the University of Alberta, for example, I contacted 5 professors and 1 was interested. We had an online meeting and that conversation went really well, and Alberta eventually became my second serious option. At Simon Fraser University, I also received a positive response, but the funding situation wasn't strong enough for what I needed. And that became a really important lesson for me. A professor being interested doesn't automatically mean that you have a funded position. You always need to ask what the funding actually looks like, how much is guaranteed, for how long, does it cover tuition? These questions matter a lot. Then there were many others. Some professors replied, many didn't. Some conversations went nowhere. But that's exactly why I'm showing you these numbers, because when you see someone online saying, I got accepted to a master's in Canada, you usually see the acceptance. You don't see the spreadsheet. You don't see the 66 emails. You don't see the unanswered messages. You don't see the rejections. You only see the final result. And my final result came from a lot of attempts. And now here's probably the weirdest part of my application story. After all of that, after researching 14 universities, after contacting 66 professors, do you know how many universities I actually submitted a formal application to? 2. University of Victoria and OIST in Japan, that's it. And there was a very specific reason for that, funding. Before paying an application fee, I wanted to know that there was actually a realistic funded opportunity for me. At UVic, I had already spoken with my potential supervisor and knew that guaranteed funding was available. And OIST also offered a funded graduate opportunity, so I decided not to spend hundreds of dollars applying everywhere just because I could. The UVic application cost me 155 Canadian dollars. The OIST application was free, so after contacting 14 universities, my total application fees were only $155, and somehow both applications were successful. I was accepted to UVic and I was also accepted to OIST, so I had to choose. I chose Canada because first, Canada had been my priority from the beginning. Second, I really liked the research opportunity at UVic. And third, the funding package made it financially possible for me to actually move here and study. So I accepted the offer, and then came the official application process. So what documents did I need? For my UVic application, I needed several main documents: my statement of interest, my CV, my bachelor's diploma and transcripts, proof of English proficiency, in my case, my TOEFL score, and 3 recommendation letters. For my recommendations, I tried to choose people who knew me in different academic and professional situations. One recommendation came from a professor I had done research with, another came from a professor connected to my internship experience, and the third came from my boss for my professional work. I think that gave the admissions committee a more complete picture of me, not only as a student but also as a researcher and as someone who had already worked professionally. And obviously requirements can be different depending on the university and program, so always check the official requirements for the specific program you're applying to. I also spent quite a lot of time working on my statement of interest and CV, and I think these 2 documents deserve much more attention than people sometimes give them. Your grades tell the university what you've done academically, but your statement and CV help explain who you are, what you've already done, what you want to do next, and why this particular program makes sense for you. Then came the visa. Getting accepted wasn't quite the end, because now I had to actually get permission to move to Canada, and because apparently my life couldn't be simple, I was in Japan when it was time to apply for my Canadian study permit. So yes, I was a Ukrainian student living temporarily in Japan, applying for permission to move to Canada. Very international. The process took approximately a month. I had to travel from Okinawa to Tokyo for biometrics and medical examination. There were documents, forms, waiting, checking the application status approximately 17 times a day, normal visa things. But thankfully everything worked out. My study permit was approved. I'm not going to go deeply into the visa process in this video because otherwise we'll be here forever, but if you're interested, I can make a separate video about the whole process, what documents I submitted, the timeline, biometrics, medical exam, proof of funds, and what it was like. And I already have experience with 3 visas, Japanese, Canadian, and spoiler alert, American. I recently got my US visa, so there will be videos about the US in the future as well. That brings us to today. I'm now doing my master's at the University of Victoria, so now we need to talk about the question everyone actually wants answered. Money. How much funding can a master's student actually get? Where does the money come from? Do I still pay tuition? How expensive is my life in Canada? And most importantly, is the funding actually enough to live here? When I say that I'm doing a fully funded master's in Canada, what does it actually mean? First, I think it's important to explain that funding can work differently depending on the university, the program, and even your supervisor. So I'm not saying that every master's student in Canada receives the same thing I do. This is simply how funding works in my particular situation. I'm doing a research-based master's degree, and when I received my offer from the University of Victoria, it came with guaranteed funding, and without funding, there is absolutely no way I would have been able to pay international tuition and living expenses in Canada by myself. My funding doesn't come from just one place, it's basically a combination of different sources. Part of it comes through the university, part of it comes through my supervisor's research funding, and I also got an opportunity to work as a teaching assistant for the full semester. If you're not familiar with the term a teaching assistant, it's basically a graduate student who helps with an undergraduate course. Depending on the position, you might help students mark assignments or exams, assist during labs or tutorials, or do other course-related work, and you get paid for that. So technically, I'm a student, a researcher, and occasionally I will be an employee of the university at the same time. Welcome to the graduate school. But do I still pay tuition? Even though my master's is funded, I still pay tuition. I receive funding and then I use part of that money to pay my tuition. But the important thing is that the funding I receive is higher than my tuition cost. So after paying tuition, I still have money left for my living expenses. So how much do I actually get? I thought about whether I wanted to put my exact personal income on the internet, and honestly, I'm not completely comfortable doing that, but I also don't want to make a video about funding and then say I get enough money. So instead, I'm going to explain it using simplified numbers. That way you can understand the proportions without me putting my exact monthly income online. Let's imagine. Let's say my tuition costs $10. Obviously it doesn't, I wish it did, but let's use $10 because the math is easy. If my tuition is $10, the funding I receive from the university portion would be approximately $12. So that part covers my tuition and leaves a little bit extra. Then I receive another part of my funding through my supervisor, and depending on the semester, there can also be income from TA work. Another way to understand it is by comparing my income to regular Canadian salary. Let's imagine that an average full-time salary is $1,000 per month. Again, completely fictional numbers. Using that scale, my income as a graduate student would be approximately $500 per month, so roughly half. And for me personally, I think that's pretty good. So if my monthly income is $500, my biggest expense is obviously rent. I currently rent a room in a house close to the university, and on our simplified scale, rent would take approximately $180. Then we have food. Groceries are definitely not cheap in Canada, so let's say approximately another $180 for food and basic everyday expenses. That leaves me with around $140, and that money can go toward everything else: going out, coffee, clothes, little trips, entertainment, and savings. One thing that helps me a lot is transportation. As a student, my public transportation pass is included through my university student fees, so I can use buses around Victoria without buying a separate monthly pass. So is the funding enough? For me personally, yes, and I want to emphasize for me personally because everyone's lifestyle and expenses are different. I don't have children, I don't have a car, I rent a room rather than an entire apartment. I'm pretty careful with money, but at the same time, I don't feel like I'm just surviving. I can go out with friends, I can go to cafes, I can travel occasionally, I can go to the gym, I can buy things when I need them. And most importantly, I can save some money too. Of course, I still have a budget, but I can live independently and still enjoy my life here. I'm 22 years old. I'm living on the other side of the world from where I grew up. I pay my own rent, I buy my own food, I pay my own expenses, I manage my own budget, and I'm completely supporting myself financially, and I'm doing that while getting my master's degree. When I think about it like that, it's actually kind of crazy because a few years ago I was sitting at home in Ukraine during COVID, learning random English words from an app with absolutely no idea where any of this would lead, and now I'm sitting in my office at a Canadian university doing research and getting paid to do it. If I had to summarize everything I did in a few steps, it would be this. First, build your background. You don't need to be perfect, but try to get experience related to what you want to study. Research, internships, work, conferences, projects, whatever opportunities are available to you. Second, work on your English if you need it. You don't have to sound like a native speaker. I definitely don't. You just need to be able to study, communicate, and show that you meet the university requirements. Third, don't only search for universities, search for people, find professors whose research genuinely interests you, read about their work, contact them. Fourth, ask about funding before spending hundreds of dollars on applications. A positive reply from a professor is great, but you also need to know whether the opportunity is financially realistic for you. And finally, don't be afraid of rejection because apparently sometimes it takes 66 emails. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!